This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Daniel Ricciardo has replaced Nick De Vries at AlphaTauri for the remainder of the 2023 season from immediate effect. Let's talk about it. No script for this one. I'm going to keep this edit nice and lean. And apologies if I sound a bit rough and look a bit rough. I was out at the Williams Bolder Than Bold golf car launch last night and I finally met Alex, so happy days. The writing was on the wall, of course. It's been spoken about loads recently. You know, Helmut Marko saying that, Christian didn't even want Nick in the first place. It was his call and he was wrong. And look, I think at the end of the day, right, Yuki's done a really good job relative to Nick. It's exposed a lack of immediate performance that I think was understandably expected to an extent at least, right, from Nick De Vries, given all of the current cars that he's tested. He's been in pretty much every single Mercedes powered current gen Formula 1 car, like last season, obviously filled in for Alex when his appendix went pop and did a great job around Monza. You say it's harsh, right? But also, what about all these other drivers who deserve opportunities in Formula 1? Now, obviously, in this instance, we've got a Daniel Ricciardo, 34-year-old Daniel Ricciardo, jumping in, who's, had a long career in Formula 1, 8 race wins to his name. So it's not giving an opportunity to a young driver, and we'll get onto Liam Lawson in a bit. Because ultimately, I think this was the right move for all parties involved, right? I don't think, apart from Nick De Vries, obviously, I guess, even for Liam Lawson, to be fair, I've got my reasoning as to why this wasn't the right move for him, not yet anyway. Nick De Vries is an established racing driver, right? And he's going to have success and do well in other disciplines. Almost kind of Marcus Ericsson-esque, right? In Formula 1, destroyed by Charles Leclerc, didn't prove that he was at the standard, yet can go to IndyCar and win Indy 500, challenging the championship this year. Marcus Ericsson is able to extract a better version of himself in IndyCar machinery. You could say the same maybe about Brendan Hartley, who does Le Mans and achieved a lot in Le Mans. And in F1, it just didn't quite work out for him. The demands of Formula 1, the unique non-spec series nature of it, does spit a lot of drivers out, and unfortunately Nick De Vries is one of those. The thing is with Ricciardo sitting on the sidelines, man, that asset of Daniel Ricciardo, you look at, Ricciardo, Hamilton, Verstappen, Norris, these four are probably the biggest commercial drivers right now in Formula 1 in the space, in terms of eyeballs, in terms of attention, in terms of fan base, and they're all top quality. Now, of course, Ricciardo, his McLaren stint didn't go well, and that does somewhat hinder expectation that he can get back to that. Ultimately, right, you look over the course of Ricciardo's career, whether it was at Red Bull challenging Max Verstappen. Max has improved since then, of course, but I don't think pace was ever Max's problem. It's the decision making, it's the maturity around things that's really, honed Max into this absolute animal at the minute. They know how to get the best out of Ricciardo. This is the thing, right? They know how to set up a car. They know what Daniel likes. They know how to play into his style of driving. So I've got very little doubt that Red Bull / AlphaTauri as well, because again, he did race at that team, and they're going to do what they can to make that work. He is on loan at AlphaTauri technically, because all the Red Bull drivers are technically employed by Red Bull and then loaned to AlphaTauri and Red Bull Racing. They have a bit of a weird structure like that. Again, I just think the upside of this move is bigger. So usually I'll take this opportunity to have a look at the drivers' websites, but actually Daniel's got Enchante that he's pushing heavy now. And actually, I've not looked at Enchante for a while, and it is a proper little brand now. A really nice, separately branded to himself clothing brand. Oh, that shirt's banging. 71 quid, it's not the cheapest, but if you do want to do something like this and you want to bring your own brand to life, then today's video sponsor, Squarespace, is the place to do it. In fact, I'm doing it right now because tickets to the Audace and Tommo live show 2 are currently right now on sale at my website, tommoclusky.co.uk, which is hosted on Squarespace. I've been using them for years. I've sold all merchandise that I've ever done through Squarespace. It's an absolute doddle. If I can manage it, trust me, you can. Free to try. And then when you do inevitably want to put your finished website live to the world, head to squarespace.com/TommoF1 to get 10% off your first website or domain. What do Red Bull actually want to achieve? Okay, for me, the number one thing they want to achieve is to vet Yuki Tsunoda, see if he's the real deal. There's been reports the way it's been spoken about Yuki is maybe he's not part of their long-term plans because they're expecting Honda Aston Martin thing to manifest at some point soon, and maybe that's the case, right? But if they put Lawson inside of Tsunoda and then Tsunoda beats Lawson, that doesn't really tell them a lot, in my opinion. That doesn't give them a lot of new information because Lawson would be a rookie. I would expect Tsunoda to be quicker than him at least at the start, right? Lawson's fantastic talent, don't get me wrong. But by putting Ricciardo in, Ricciardo, who is a known entity outside of that McLaren, he's a known entity in Toro Rosso, in Red Bull, in Renault. If you can come in and actually beat Daniel Ricciardo, a proven 8-time race winner, a driver we know how to get the best out of at Red Bull Racing, then maybe there's a shot at the tops, and maybe Yuki is gonna deliver on that rough diamondness that I've talked about for a long time. Conversely, if Daniel batters Yuki, then unfortunately, you know, I'm a big fan of Yuki, right? But if that was to happen, what's the kind of justification of necessarily keeping him on? Maybe just to keep that seat warm for the short term, but is he going to be the next Max Verstappen if Max is going to retire in 2028? I know that's still quite a way away, but Red Bull are going to be thinking about that. Can they bring a driver in alongside Max and really build and grow that and develop? You know, I mean, again, Helmut's been quoted talking about Lando Norris very favourably, that he'd be a great fit for the team because just as much on track as his off track stuff, kind of they feel like that fits with the Red Bull brand, which I can kind of understand. But then also, if Ricciardo was to smash Yuki, then that brings up the whole Perez debate, right? Because obviously that's what Daniel's looking for. Daniel wants to be back in the Red Bull. Obviously, of course he does. He wouldn't be doing this if that wasn't the case. He wouldn't be taking what is arguably the worst car on the grid right now. Why would he be interested in that opportunity if it didn't mean he's going to potentially get back into a top seat? You know, there's no upside to that. This for sure does ramp up the pressure a little bit more on Checo, and perhaps Red Bull will be able to pull. You know, they've done the tyre test on Tuesday around Silverstone, and they seem pretty impressed. All the reports I've seen, they were pretty happy with it, satisfied with how quick he was going in that current gen Red Bull. So you learn more about Yuki, you learn whether Ricciardo is that guy, because ultimately, yes, Checo has a huge fan base, particularly Latin American, brings sponsors to that team as well, Telcel, Telmex, all that. But having Ricciardo back in that team, the story of him coming back and being alongside Max once again at a completely different stage of both of their careers. If they put Daniel in that Red Bull, you're going to be shifting a lot more Red Bull merchandise for sure. I expect to see a lot more AlphaTauri merchandise once they start printing the merch with Ricciardo on the back of it. And again, remember, right, AlphaTauri are rebranding. Red Bull are going to change that up next season. We don't know what to yet. I'd be surprised if they don't leverage Ricciardo in that announcement. Now, of course, it does very much depend on when they announce it. We don't know if Daniel's going to get beyond the end of this season. There's a bit of nuance there, right? But having that big grin, that big smiley face on the front of your new team, whatever that may be, is only going to help. But then back to Lawson, right? Because there are a few reasons, and Lawson has been the driver that a lot of people have understandably been pushing and promoting as being, this is the guy the Red Bull should go with. Ultimately, you know, I do think more long term, I think from 2024 onwards, I can fully back that. For me, I think they give Daniel till the end of this season. They give him 12 races in the AlphaTauri, and then they make a decision. They either put him in the Red Bull or just get shot. Because for them to do the test, right, and then combine with 12 races in an AlphaTauri, for me, that is enough of a sample for them to have a pretty educated guess as to whether he or Checo should be in that seat. Ultimately, even if they have to pay Checo out of his contract, like the revenue that Daniel's going to generate, and he'll probably willingly take a pay cut, I can imagine. Let's not waste time here, right? Let's make this decision. Sergio is bedded into that team, but he is making a lot of mistakes at the minute. The potential upside for Daniel is huge, especially if he can be closer to Max, which I think Daniel... To be honest, I think Daniel would be closer to Max, for sure. And if there's other teams joining that championship fight in 2024, Checo isn't close enough, often enough, to be a rear gunner to Max and help in terms of pit stop strategies and that, right? Again, right now, that's not an issue. But Red Bull need to plan for that to become an issue, because the regulations, which I believe they will do their job in 24 and even more so in 2025, then there are going to be multiple teams fighting for a world championship, and Red Bull need to anticipate and expect that and then plan accordingly. And I don't know if Checo is the guy who's close enough to Max to rear gun. Again, I fully endorse a 1-2 in a team. I've said this many a time, right? And they've got a clear 1-2 right now. And I think they'd have a clear 1-2 with Max and Daniel at the wheel. But having just Max and Daniel like now as well, right? They were big names when they raced in Red Bull together, right? But I feel like now there's so much with the whole Drive to Survive effect and so many more people following the sport. And Daniel was a huge component of Drive to Survive. He was one of the few drivers who really jumped on it right from the outset. So now with his current caliber in a top team alongside Max Verstappen, Max Verstappen fans are incredible. Like the following is insane that they've cultivated, right? Red Bull and Max. Like I said at the start, that AlphaTauri is clearly, one of the weakest, if not the weakest car on the grid. And to put Liam Lawson into that car is a difficult one, right? Versus him seeing out this Super Formula season where he's doing a really good job so far. It's certainly closer to F1 than Formula 2 is, and Red Bull often use this as a bit of a proving ground. They had Pierre Gasly in there, for example, before he got promoted to Formula 1 and Toro Rosso. Allow Liam to continue developing. I think Red Bull, again, I think they've been guilty of promoting too soon in the past, right? And I think there's an opportunity here, again, a learning opportunity around Ricciardo and Tsunoda and Perez, where putting Liam in kind of takes away a lot of that learning opportunity, that potential upside. Because another thing that, in my opinion, and maybe I'm biased because he's my favourite F2 driver, but I do think that it's, I think it's maybe too soon to write off any other Red Bull options, and I'm specifically talking Ayumu Iwasa, who's currently P3 in Formula 2. Last year in F2, he was only 8 points behind Liam, and this was in Ayumu's rookie season versus Liam's second season in F2. Let's just imagine for a second, and who knows, right? Because Vesti's got a pretty good lead at the minute, but imagine Ayumu wins Formula 2. He's Formula 2 champion in his second season, and he's a Red Bull junior. And then you've got Lawson, who finished I think he finished 9th, and then last year he finished 3rd in Formula 2, and now in Super Formula, should have won DTM. We all know that. For me, it's not an absolute clear-cut choice between the two. Now, obviously, that Honda connection that Iwasa has, as well as Tsunoda, they're both part of the HRC. Maybe that's actually going to weaken Iwasa's position, whereas Lawson is Red Bull through and through. I think he's been at the academy since he was like 17 or something. So let Liam see out the rest of the season, let Iwasa see out the rest of his season as well, and then reevaluate at the end of 2023 when then obviously Red Bull will, potentially move Ricciardo to Red Bull, or they'll keep Checo, or they'll move Tsunoda on or up or whatever. Like, it's just a bit more kind of well-rounded doing it that way, rather than just putting Liam or Lawson in mid-season. I just don't want Red Bull to rush this one, and I think Liam's such a fantastic talent. He did beat Logan Sargent in F2 last year, only just at the end, but he's clearly got the capability. You look through his record, and it's mainly, wins, if not really close to the front, which is a good sign. Consistency. And again, that DTM season where he was pretty convincingly clear of Alex as well, right? So super impressive. But again, look, different disciplines, different drivers suit different. I mean, DTM versus Formula 1 is night and day, but that showcases an adaptability in Liam's driving, which is a really strong asset to have, and he's gone away and he's proved that. So I do think he will get his time, but I don't think this was the right time for Liam. I'm happy for Ricciardo to get the opportunity. I think it was the right choice. I think it made the most sense. But I guess we'll see. How do you think it should have played out? Let me know in the comments down below. My name's Tommo. Thanks again. Have a good one. Ta-da.